Super Mario Maker 2's multiplayer versus mode had the potential to rival Smash Bros. And Mario Kart as Nintendo's next competitive hit. But the execution of this game mode is so shockingly bad, it became borderline unplayable. What is this mode? What makes it good? And what decisions led to its downfall? And how could it be fixed in Mario Maker 3? This is the tragic story of Super Mario Maker 2's multiplayer versus. Nintendo is known for usually being a little behind the times when it comes to embracing online features. With that in mind, I was surprised that Super Mario Maker 2 included a competitive racing mode where up to 4 players compete to get to the end of a level first. The idea is brilliant. It's easily the reason I still play Mario Maker to this day, and it's the part of the game I have played the most. But it's riddled with some glaring issues. Here's the main problem. Since Mario Maker revolves around user-generated levels and Mario Maker is a game for all ages, most of the levels uploaded to the game's servers are not professional, to put it lightly. And Multiplayer Versus does not have an effective filter for these bad levels. Sure, after every level you play, the players are made to cast a vote for whether or not they liked or disliked the level. However, if you've played more than 3 rounds of this mode, you will see that not enough effort was made to weed out the riffraff. I would say probably about half of the levels you get thrown into make the round unenjoyable, either because they are a low-effort garbage level, or they are an otherwise decent level that just isn't fit for multiplayer versus. While this is bad on its own, the level selection problem is only exasperated by how long it takes to go from one level to the next. Obviously, with any online game, it's a given that you'll have to wait a bit to connect to the server, but multiplayer versus mode still has a lot of arbitrary time-wasting hurdles that pop up between levels. First off, the aforementioned level voting system takes on average about 10 seconds. Since even if you vote quickly, you still have to wait for all the other players to vote too. Why? I don't care what 3 strangers thought about the level. Just let me boo this garbage and move on. It makes me resent the voting system even more because not only does it not feel like the votes have an effect on the levels we play, but now it's something that wastes my time. And don't even get me started on if you want to quit a level before it ends. In order to give up on a level, you have to bring up the menu, which you can't do if you just lost a life and are waiting to respawn, even though that's probably the most common moment you want to hit give up. So once you hit give up, it gives you the oh no death animation, which takes more time. Then it asks you if you want to spectate, which 99.99% of the time you don't want to spectate, but it's gotta ask you anyway. I really resent the tone of the you gave up screen. It's so tone deaf to the most likely reason someone gave up the level. Most of the time when you quit a level, it's because the game gave you an unplayable level that you don't want to waste your time on. But the game has the audacity to be like, you gave up, loser, quitter. After the game mocks you, it brings up the voting screen. Usually, if you give up on a level, you aren't allowed to vote anything other than neutral. So why even bring up the voting screen? Also, levels I give up on are usually the ones most deserving of a boo. The fact that you usually can't boo levels you give up on probably leads to a lot of bad levels slipping through the cracks. Because most of the time when I get a bad level, I'm not gonna sit around and finish it. I give up instead. I don't have all day to finish a bad level just so I can vote boo. It's not gonna make a difference anyway. I also take issue with how you get scored and ranked in multiplayer versus as well. First off, letter rankings? Seriously? This is Mario. Why can't we be flower rank and star rank? Letter ranks? Ugh. It's so boring and corporatized. The way to get points and rank up is pretty simple. Win a level, get points. Lose a level, lose points. But there's one slight complication. If you don't get to the end first, you have a few seconds to grab the flagpole before the match is called. And if you make it to the flag, you're not gonna lose as many points as you would have if you didn't. I like that a lot, as it gives a more neutral outcome if you don't make it to the flag first. Like, you didn't win, but you also didn't totally lose either. However, if the ending doesn't have a flagpole, like the Axes and Castles or Super Mario Bros. 3 or World levels, you won't get fewer points lost if you almost hit the goal. It'll just end once the first person finishes, leaving all 3 other characters to lose the maximum amount of points regardless of where they were. This is totally unfair, as now something arbitrary like the level theme is now determining how severe my loss is, instead of my quality of play. They could have just programmed something where multiple players could hit non-flagpole endings, and honestly the fact that they didn't kind of speaks to how little they cared about this mode. I can just picture the board meeting. They're like, yeah, we can have some players, you know, when they get to the flag, the ones who didn't make it first could get on there. And they're like, oh, but like, you know, what if it's like an axe, you know? Should we like program something more? And they're like, nah, they just didn't care. And it shows. But let's get to the real problem with multiplayer versus the overabundance of bad levels. I have compiled a curated list of all the different kinds of bad levels you may encounter here, and I'm really looking forward to sharing them with you. Let's begin with the worst of the worst. The 2 most common types of low-effort trash levels, also known as Little Timmy levels, are the straight line to the goal and enemy spam. Obviously, these levels are designed by little kids, so I'm not gonna go too hard on the creators of these levels. The blame lies on Nintendo for not properly filtering these levels out. Since low-effort trash levels don't possess any challenge, the winner usually is the person who ends up ahead of the pack at the start. It's basically a race to see who can get out of the opening box first. Sure, there's strategy to whether or not you can get ahead once the timer says go, but that shouldn't decide the entire level. Next up, we're gonna talk about levels that are just kinda bad. Not outright trash like Little Timmy levels, but just These are levels that look like they've got a little heart and creativity in them, but just end up ending a little too fast or have little substance. These are probably also designed by younger creators, or maybe people who are trying to learn the ropes of level design. There's a lot of value in being able to express your creativity through designing Mario levels. Everyone has to start somewhere, and making Mario levels, no matter how bad, is a good use of someone's creative mind. With that in mind, I, as a player, am not interested in playing lower quality levels. Sorry. I'd say I feel the same way about levels like this that I do about a preschool talent show. I'm glad they're doing it, but if I don't know anyone involved, I'm not exactly looking to sit through it. Similar to Little Timmy levels, the winner of these levels is usually the person who gets out of the starting box first. There is one important strategy to keep in mind if you get yourself in one of these mediocre levels. Make sure to avoid getting any power-ups, and don't touch any checkpoint flags. The time delay of stopping to get a power-up will give another player a chance to get ahead. And checkpoints can sometimes give you auto power-ups, which will make you freeze in place for a moment, allowing someone to pass you. Every so often, you'll get a level that was clearly designed for one player only. Now, these can be high quality levels, but they just don't work with the multiplayer versus format. Take, for example, this level that has tricky platforming. Like, I'm sure this level is great on its own, but with multiple players, it's just a mess. I just cannot fathom the mindset of a person who sits down, opens up Super Mario Maker 2, creates 1-1 from Super Mario Bros., and then just posts it. Why? Why would you do this? This level has already been made. Why are you posting it and sending it out into the world? What good do you think you are adding to the universe? This practice is apparently really common because I find myself playing 1-1 a lot when I go on multiplayer versus. Most of the times, they don't even design it right. Like this one right here, they didn't even make the subworld accurate. The way to win 1-1 ripoffs is to go into the subworld at the 4th pipe. Sometimes creators just straight up forget to put it there, but most of the time they do, and it's the faster way to the end. There are other unoriginal levels that creators post a lot as well, such as the first level of New Super Mario Bros. DS. Since everyone knows these levels, it's not much different from playing a mediocre level, as you can just run through them with little resistance. Pretty much, whoever gets out of the box first will win as long as you don't make a foolish mistake. Keys should make a level automatically ineligible for multiplayer versus. Here's how keys work in versus. If a player gets a key and are jumped on by another player, the key is transferred to the player that jumped on your head. On the surface, it sounds fair, but in practice, Not really. I just don't think this system works very well, because it often just leads to random chaos rather than a situation where the more skilled player gets on top. Maybe there's a strategy I'm not seeing and I just need to get good, but as it stands, I feel keys and clear conditions just don't vibe with multiplayer versus. Some people, I think, enjoy the chaos of the keys, but I think that since most of the time it boils down to the win or loss not feeling deserved, and there's no way to possibly mitigate that, I advocate for removing keys entirely. The only good levels I've seen that revolve around keys are competition levels, in which you attempt to steal the key from your opponent under a time limit. Since they're designed around stealing the key, they feel more fair. But these cool kinds of levels are maybe 1 in 100, and they're not worth keys potentially ruining other levels which show up more frequently. Clear conditions can be awful too, but for different reasons. If the clear condition is something like get 100 coins, then the clear condition is given only to the person who touches the 100th coin, which makes it completely luck-based. Once the person gets the clear condition, it operates similar to a key, as it can be stolen when someone jumps on their head. And then we just have the same issue I have with keys. Removing clear conditions does mess up the design of some levels designed around multiplayer versus. If clear conditions were removed entirely from Mario Maker multiplayer versus, there are some levels that are designed around separating all the players and putting them on their own individual race course that use clear conditions to their advantage. Since none of the players can physically touch each other, the first person to touch the big coin or whatever else they made the clear condition will be guaranteed the win. Without clear conditions, the design of these levels will be hindered greatly. So I think there's a bit more nuance as to whether or not they should be included. Perhaps some clear conditions can be allowed. That way we can have those competition levels I talked about earlier, as well as the separate race levels. Here's what I'm thinking. Only clear conditions that require getting one thing can be eligible for multiplayer versus, and it's up to the level designer to decide whether the clear condition can be stolen or not. So if someone wants to make a level where you fight your opponents in an arena, they can make it so the clear condition can be stolen. But if someone wants to make a level where a boss must be defeated, they can make it so they can't steal your clear condition, so that the person that got the final blow on the boss will definitely get the win. So, we've talked a lot about bad levels, but what happens when multiplayer versus decides to bless us with an actually good level? I talked a little bit before about race levels that put all of the players into their own separate level to race against the others. I would say that these are the most common type of multiplayer versus level you will get. You can tell that a level's going to be this way the moment you begin and see 4 pipes, usually with some kind of mechanism to make sure only one player can enter one pipe. In these race levels, the 4 players embark on a race where they cannot interact with one another. I do have one issue with these kinds of levels. Since you can't touch the other players at all, it kind of loses the appeal of multiplayer versus. You're still competing, sure, but you don't have any effect on your opponents. And I think that kind of loses the essence of this mode. Levels like this aren't bad by any means, but I do feel the need to point that out. The best levels you can get in multiplayer versus are well-designed levels without gimmicks. There's nothing like going through a normal level racing against other players and stomping on each other's heads and trying to throw shells at people. It's really the peak of the mode. While those 4-pipe race levels are great, all I really want to do is just run through a normal level and race my opponents. And for some reason, this almost never happens. Like, that's the main idea you would have when you think about this mode, and it's super infrequent. I'd say about half the levels you get in multiplayer versus are complete garbage. About 40% of them are those versus race levels, which are fine, but not my favorite. And maybe about 1 in 10 are levels I actually am looking for. So, how do we fix this? First, I will ask the question, should this be fixed? Is part of the fun of playing multiplayer versus getting bad levels? After all, it's about playing community levels. The community makes bad levels sometimes. Shouldn't we embrace that? No. Sorry, I don't want this dumb, chaotic fun. And you don't either. Because trust me, it gets really old after a few rounds. I want a properly designed competitive mode, and I really don't think that's too much to ask for. So the first big change I would make for multiplayer versus is for the level creators themselves to have to check a box before they post their levels. That would tell Mario Maker that they want that level to be included in multiplayer versus. Currently, there's a multiplayer versus tag, but I don't think that's effective enough. I would say that a majority of these Mario Maker creators are honest. And if they make a level that clearly only works with one player, they would make sure not to check this box. Sure, you're gonna get people who explicitly make levels to troll and then click the box, but overall, if this change were made, it would end up being a net positive for the player base. Also, since the multiplayer versus box would not be on by default and would be something the level creator would have to go out of their way to turn on, a lot of little Timmys trying out the maker will breeze right past it and not even know that it's an option, which will lower the amount of levels uploaded by inexperienced creators. There also should be certain kinds of levels that are immediately disqualified from being multiplayer versus. Like I said earlier, keys and some clear conditions should immediately remove levels from the pool, but I also think that short levels should be removed as well. Even if there's a good short level out there, I honestly don't want to play it in multiplayer versus just because it's gonna take so long to load the next level, so why would I want to play a level that's not that long? Since a majority of bad levels are too short, simply removing all short levels would mostly remove bad levels. I also think that there could be a way for the game to detect enemy spam. If there's, say, 4 or more Bowsers within 10 blocks of one another or 20 Goombas all right next to each other, make the level ineligible. There is no decent level that would include that. And if there is, well, I'd rather lose those few levels than deal with the many enemy spam levels. Now, all of these restrictions wouldn't remove every bad level ever. Obviously, no matter what they do, some trash is going to slip through the cracks. But I'm sure they can do a lot more to filter it better and make the overall player experience so much more enjoyable. Lastly, I think there should be different categories of multiplayer versus that use certain levels that are hand-picked by Nintendo, similar to how Smash Bros. Has different tournaments. Now, this one is probably a big ask since it would require staff to consistently vet levels, or perhaps it could be decided at least in part by an algorithm picking, say, the best 25 race levels and having you play on those. This would also be great because you could master each individual race level and truly earn a higher ranking. Sometimes when I finish a certain good level, I almost hope I'll see it again because I think I would do better next time. But most of the time when you get a level, it'll be the only time you'll ever play it. Of course, I think there should still be a random level option that has a wider pool, but having certain level categories and allowing players to practice and perfect specific levels, I think would really go a long way at making this a proper competitive game. And that's really what I'm getting at. I want Mario Maker 3's multiplayer versus to truly define itself as a competitive game. Super Mario Bros. Gameplay is one of the biggest foundations of gaming as a whole, and Mario Maker Multiplayer Versus had an opportunity to turn the most iconic version of 2D platforming into a proper competition, the likes of which has never been done before, and they failed. That's why Mario Maker 2's Multiplayer Versus disappoints me so much. The worst part about it is that the only thing it needed was a proper level selection algorithm, and it would truly be one of the best online modes known to gaming. Hey, if you like this Mario video, maybe you'd like to check out this other video right here, or check out this video right here. If you like what I do and want to see me do more of it, consider becoming a channel member or supporting my Patreon. Link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.